Welcome to AudioCert, where the official study guides are brought to life. Welcome, everyone, to another deep dive. Today, we're plunging into a topic that affects nearly every single one of us, every single day. The intricate and often hidden world of mobile device vulnerabilities. We're going to peel back the layers on how these powerful little computers in our pockets, our digital handheld battlefield, can be compromised. We'll look at the ingenious and sometimes frankly alarming strategies attackers use, and crucially, the essential countermeasures we can all employ to stay safe.
It really is an area of security that, well, despite its immense importance, often gets overlooked by the average user. Think about it. Think about how many times you've reached for your phone today for something vital. Checking email, navigating with GPS, maybe making a purchase, or accessing sensitive work documents. That sheer convenience is exactly what attackers are looking to exploit. Our smartphones and tablets have largely replaced traditional desktops and laptops for so many daily digital interactions, right?
Absolutely.
Yet many users mistakenly believe mobile internet usage is inherently safe, sort of neglecting crucial security practices. And this combination of widespread popularity and, let's be honest, often moderate default security makes them prime targets.
That's a powerful point, and it's quite ironic, isn't it, given how much critical data we trust these devices with. My phone holds pretty much everything. Contact lists, passwords, my calendar, login credentials for dozens of services, both personal and professional. And like you said, it's not just personal life, is it? We're seeing a massive surge in mobile commerce, buying goods, downloading apps, redeeming coupons, banking, all from these handheld devices. It truly is a double-edged sword. Unprecedented convenience met with, well, escalating risk. Tag the expanding threat landscape where mobile devices are most vulnerable.
Precisely. And this whole shift has made mobile security incredibly challenging. We're seeing increasingly complex attacks that don't just hit one weak point, they exploit multiple vectors to get at our sensitive information. And these aren't just about individual users losing data. They target critical financial information, personal details. They can even severely damage the reputation of mobile networks and organizations if they get compromised.
So it's a high-stakes game then. And if we visualize this mobile business environment, as you call it, it's not just the device itself, is it?
Yeah.
It's every pathway it uses to communicate that becomes a potential point of entry.
Absolutely. Think about the myriad ways a mobile device connects.
Yeah.
Cellular networks like 3G, 4G, and now 5G, short-range wireless like Bluetooth and Wi-Fi, even wired connections to computers. A security threat can emerge at any point during data transmission across any of these channels. It's quite complex. And because smartphones are used for both business and personal purposes, they become these digital treasure troves for attackers. They hold this mix of corporate and personal data that's incredibly valuable. Imagine connecting to a public Wi-Fi, then maybe a corporate VPN gateway, interacting with an app store, pulling data from various websites, communicating with other devices via Bluetooth. Each interaction is a potential vulnerability point.
It sounds like a minefield. So to help us navigate this vast and shifting attack surface, let's turn to OWASP, the Open Worldwide Application Security Project. Their top 10 mobile risks list is kind of a benchmark for mobile application security, helping us understand the critical flaws. What are the absolute essentials we need to know from that list?
Yeah, the OWASP list is fundamental. For a well-informed listener like yours, we probably don't need to go through every single one with basic analogies. It's more about grasping the impact of the most critical ones. Let's focus on a few key areas that often lead to really devastating breaches. First, M1, improper credential usage. This is all about insecure handling of your login details. Think hard-coded passwords right there in the app's code. Maybe unencrypted storage of access tokens or sending them over insecure channels. The insight here is attackers are actively looking for those lazy shortcuts developers sometimes take with your keys.
Like leaving your house keys hidden under the welcome mat, essentially.
Exactly like that, yeah. Then, next, M2, inadequate supply chain security. This is a big one. It means vulnerabilities coming from outdated or flawed third-party components or libraries used within an app. It's like a chef using expired ingredients, right? Even if their part of the recipe is perfect, the whole dish is compromised because of that one bad component.
Right, so weak link in the chain.
Exactly. It can unravel the entire application security. The takeaway is a single weak link in the software supply chain can doom the whole thing. Then we have M3, insecure authentication authorization. This covers things like weak password policies, improper handling of session tokens, or maybe flawed authorization checks. Basically, if the bouncer at the digital club isn't checking IDs properly, attackers can impersonate legitimate users or just walk right past the authentication.
So weak identity checks are basically an open invitation.
You got it. A direct invitation for account takeover. Another critical one is M5 insecure communication. This means apps using insecure protocols like plain HTTP instead of HTTPS, or maybe using invalid SSL certificates. It's like whispering your secrets in a crowded public square. The key lesson here is you have to assume any unencrypted communication is being listened to, period.
That seems like a fundamental mistake for an app to make.
It is, but you'd be surprised how often it happens. Finally, let's touch on M9 insecure data storage. This is when sensitive data gets stored insecurely on the device itself, maybe in plain text files, unsecured databases, or using really weak encryption. The implication: if your digital valuables aren't locked away in a robust safe on the device, they're just sitting there, ripe for the taking if someone gets access.
Okay, so those seem like the heavy hitters. What about the others on the list?
The other OWASP risks, like insufficient input-output validation, inadequate privacy controls, insufficient binary protections, security misconfiguration, and insufficient cryptography, they're all absolutely crucial too, but, they often tie back to these core themes we just discussed. Weak identity management, unsecure communication, and poor data handling practices. The overall message is really clear. Mobile applications are often built with fundamental security weaknesses, and attackers know this and actively seek them out. Hashtag Anatomy of a Mobile Attack dissecting the threat landscape.
That OWASP overview really does highlight the breadth of these vulnerabilities. It's almost overwhelming when you think about how many ways an app can be flawed. But understanding those individual weak points helps us see how attackers often stitch them together, doesn't it? It's usually not just a single-point failure.
That's right. Mobile attacks often involve a combination of things, exploiting vulnerabilities at the device layer, maybe the network layer, or even the back-end data center, or sometimes all three.
And this seems especially relevant with BYOD, bring your own device policies, making personal mobile devices prime targets for corporate data theft too.
That's a critical point. The convenience of BYOD, well, it often comes with seriously underestimated risks. Let's break down these attack points further, maybe starting with the device itself.
Okay, so what kinds of attacks directly target the mobile device itself, leveraging its own features or maybe flaws within it?
Device-based attacks come in several flavors. First, you've got browser-based attacks, which leverage the web browser on your phone. Phishing is the classic example, right? Deceptive web pages that mimic trusted sites. And on a small mobile screen with limited URL visibility and often truncated warning messages, users are, unfortunately, even more likely to fall victim.
Yeah, it's harder to spot the fake URL sometimes.
Exactly. Then there's framing, iframe, and clickjacking. This is where malicious elements are cleverly hidden within interfaces that look legitimate. An attacker essentially embeds their malicious page within a trusted one, trying to trick you into clicking something you didn't intend to.
Nakey.
Very. Then you have man in the mobile. This involves implanting malware specifically designed to bypass those one-time password OTP verification systems sent via SMS or voice. The malware intercepts the OTP and sends it to the attacker.
Wow, so it defeats that layer of security directly.
It can, yes. And finally, within browser attacks, there's data caching. Attackers exploit sensitive information that's temporarily stored in the device's caches, often data needed for web apps to function smoothly.
It's incredible how many of those rely on manipulating the user interface and, well, our inherent trust in what we see on the screen.
Yeah.
Beyond the browser, we also have phone SMS-based attacks. Smishing comes to mind immediately.
Exactly. Smishing, or SMS phishing, is simply sending deceptive text messages containing malicious links or phone numbers. Attackers often use things like prepaid SMS cards bought with fake identities to launch these campaigns. It's disturbingly easy.
And why is it so effective? People seem to fall for texts more readily than emails sometimes.
There are several reasons, actually. You have high open rates for SMS. People tend to read their texts. There's also a general user trust in text messages, maybe more than email. Plus, the limited content space makes it harder to spot red flags. And as we mentioned, most mobile devices have less robust security software than desktops. Attackers can also easily spoof sender numbers to look legitimate.
Right, making it look like it came from your bank or a delivery service.
Precisely. I've definitely seen examples of that myself. Messages like, "Urgent! Your bank account is frozen. Click here to reactivate." Or, "You've won a prize. Claim it now." They all create that sense of urgency.
Definitely. Okay, moving on from SMS, what about application-based attacks, targeting the apps themselves?
Yes. These target flaws within the actual apps you install, things like sensitive data storage where apps with weak database security can just leave user information vulnerable on the device, or no encryption, weak encryption. If an app transmits data without proper encryption or with poor encryption, it's susceptible to things like session hijacking. There's also improper SSL validation. Loopholes in how an app implements secure sockets layer validation can allow attackers to bypass data security measures. And a really common one, unintended permissions. Misconfigured apps can grant excessive or unnecessary permissions, opening doors for attackers to access sensitive device features or data they shouldn't have access to.
So yeah, if an app asks for access to your microphone when it's just, say, a simple calculator game, that should be a huge red flag.
Absolutely. Always question permissions. Lastly, for device-based attacks, there are also system OS-based attacks.
Targeting the operating system itself.
Exactly. The most basic is no passcode weak passcode. An easily guessed PIN or pattern lock is just an open door. Then you have iOS jailbreaking and Android rooting. We'll get into these more later, but essentially, they remove the built-in security mechanisms of the OS, granting root or administrative access. While users might do it for customization, it introduces significant risks, primarily making the device way more vulnerable to malware because the security sandbox is gone.
Right. It breaks the security model.
It does. There's also OS data caching. An attacker could potentially dump memory from the OS cache after something like a reboot, extracting sensitive data that was stored there temporarily. And finally, carrier-loaded software. Sometimes the software pre-installed by carriers can contain exploitable vulnerabilities. Not always, but it happens.
Okay, so that covers a lot of ways to attack the device directly. But what about everything that happens in between? The network layer seems equally, if not maybe more, vulnerable.
It is, perhaps even more so in many ways, precisely because data often travels through channels we don't control, and that might be insecure. Think about Wi-Fi with weak or no encryption. If apps transmit sensitive data over an unencrypted or poorly secured Wi-Fi network, attackers on the same network can easily eavesdrop and intercept that information.
Like at a coffee shop or airport.
Exactly the places.
Yeah.
Then you have rogue access points. Attackers set up illicit Wi-Fi hotspots that mimic legitimate ones, maybe free airport Wi-Fi. Users connect, thinking it's safe, and the attacker hijacks their connection, seeing everything they do online.
That's a classic trap.
It is. Then there's the broader category of man-in-the-middle MITM attacks. This is where attackers insert themselves into the communication path between two systems, like your phone and a website. They can then read or even modify the data as it passes through.
And how do they achieve that?
Several ways. Session hijacking is one, where attackers steal valid session IDs, maybe sniffed from an insecure network, to gain unauthorized access to user accounts without needing a password. And related to MITM are techniques like DNS poisoning and SSL strip. DNS poisoning redirects users to malicious sites by corrupting the phone's understanding of web addresses. SSL stripping is nastier. It forces a connection that should be secure HTTPS down to insecure HTTP, making interception easy.
Wow, that's actively downgrading security. Okay, that's a lot of ways to get in between people and their data. Are there more specific, perhaps lesser-known network attacks we should be aware of?
Absolutely. Some are quite advanced and target the very infrastructure of mobile communication itself, like blue snarfing and blue bugging. These exploit open Bluetooth connections. Blue snarfing is about stealing information like contacts or emails from a discoverable device nearby. Blue bugging is worse. It aims to gain remote control over a device via Bluetooth, letting the attacker make calls or send messages as you.
So keep Bluetooth off unless you need it.
Good advice. Then there's a major one. Exploiting SS7 signaling System 7 vulnerability. Now, SS7 is, think of it as the backbone protocol that allows mobile networks worldwide to talk to each other, routing calls and texts. The problem is, it was built on a foundation of trust between carriers without strong authentication. This fundamental flaw means attackers can trick the network. They can reroute your calls and texts, intercept those crucial one-time passwords for banking or logins.
So they can bypass two-factor authentication that relies on SMS.
Exactly. They intercept the SMS OTP. It's a hugely powerful exploit because it targets the core telecom infrastructure, not just your device or an app.
That's genuinely alarming.
It is. There's also Simjacker, a SIM card attack. This involves sending malicious code via a specific type of SMS to the SIM card itself. If the SIM executes it, the code can allow attackers to request the device's location or even send SMS messages from the victim's phone, all without them knowing.
Attack the SIM card directly.
And finally, OTP hijacking two-factor authentication, 2FA, hijacking in general. Beyond SS7, attackers hijack one-time passwords and redirect them. This can happen through sophisticated social engineering, maybe bribing or tricking telecom provider employees into swapping your SIM to one they control. Or even just by physically monitoring lock screen notifications if someone can see your phone.
Okay, so we've covered the device and the network. That leaves the final piece, the back end, the data center or the cloud, where the applications and services actually live. What vulnerabilities exist there that mobile apps interact with?
Right, the server side. These vulnerabilities are often similar to traditional web application attacks, but they're exploited through the mobile client's interactions with the server. You have general web server-based attacks, things like platform vulnerabilities exploiting flaws in the operating system, the server software itself like ISAs or Apache, or application modules running on the server. Server misconfiguration is common too. An incorrectly configured web server can grant unauthorized access to its resources or files it shouldn't expose.
Like leaving a backdoor unlocked.
Precisely. Then you have classics like cross-site scripting, XSS, where attackers inject malicious client-side scripts into web pages, which then get executed in the user's mobile browser when they visit that page. And cross-site request forgery, CSRF, this is where an attacker tricks a user's browser into sending unintended, malicious requests to a website where the user is already logged in, making the site think the malicious request came from the legitimate user.
Okay.
A key one for mobile is weak input validation on the server side. Sometimes mobile web services might overly trust the input coming from the mobile app, assuming the app has already validated it. Attackers can bypass the app's logic, forge their own communication directly to the server, and exploit this missing server-side validation to perform unauthorized actions or inject malicious data.
So the server needs to check everything, not just trust the app.
Absolutely. Never trust the client. And of course, you have database attacks. SQL injection is the perennial threat. Attackers pass malicious SQL commands through web applications to the back-end databases, hoping to gain unauthorized access or retrieve sensitive information directly from the database. They might also aim for privilege escalation, exploiting flaws to gain higher-level access within the database, making data theft easier. Hashtag hacking Android OS, the Wild West of mobile devices.
That's a truly comprehensive look at the attack surface's device, network, and server. Now, let's maybe zero in on the specific operating system, starting with Android. It's often called the Wild West of mobile devices because of its open nature, right?
That's a pretty fair characterization, yeah. And it really stems from its underlying architecture. Android, developed by Google, isn't just an OS. It's a whole software environment. OS, middleware, core applications. Its layered architecture is key to understanding both its capabilities and its vulnerabilities. You've got the Linux kernel at the bottom managing hardware drivers, then layers like the hardware abstraction layer, HAL, native libraries, the Android runtime executing apps, the Java API framework developers use, and finally the system apps like your dialer or camera. It's a complex stack.
Given that open nature you mentioned, how does this layered architecture both, well, enable innovation, but also complicate security for Android?
It's definitely a double-edged sword. The open source nature means a huge developer community, which is great for innovation and flexibility. That's the enabling part. However, the complicating part is that this openness also means greater transparency for attackers to find vulnerabilities. Plus, the fragmentation, so many different manufacturers customizing Android on countless devices, running different versions, makes consistent security patching a massive challenge. Each layer, if not properly secured by the manufacturer or updated, can become an entry point.
That makes sense. Speaking of securing Android, especially in a business context, what about the Android Device Administration API? That sounds important for enterprise use.
Absolutely. The Android Device Administration API is crucial for enterprise settings. It provides system-level administration features that allow security-aware applications, particularly mobile device management solutions, to exert strong control over employee devices. It lets IT departments enforce policies like requiring strong passwords, setting inactivity lock times, mandating storage encryption, disabling the camera, or even performing remote device lock and data wipe if a device is lost or stolen. It's a really powerful tool for corporate security on Android.
Okay, now let's talk about something many Android enthusiasts and maybe some listeners have dabbled in, but which has pretty significant security implications. Android rooting. You called it a double-edged sword earlier.
It really is. Android rooting is the process of gaining privilege control, often called root access, over the Android operating system's core. It's done to overcome restrictions put in place by manufacturers or carriers. Users might do it for deep customization, removing pre-installed bloatware, accessing low-level hardware features, or maybe improving performance. Those are the perceived benefits.
The risks.
The security risks are substantial. First, it almost always voids your device warranty. It can lead to poor performance or instability. More importantly, it makes the device highly susceptible to malware infection because it bypasses the Android security sandbox that normally isolates apps. And in the worst-case scenario, a mistake during rooting can brick the device, rendering it completely inoperable. It essentially dismantles the default security model that Google designed. #tag hacking Android devices, exploits, and methods.
So, given this open architecture and the possibility of rooting, how do attackers actually go about exploiting Android devices? What are some of the key methods they use?
Attackers have a whole toolkit, really. For just identifying potential attack surfaces, they use tools like drozer. This lets them discover vulnerabilities in Android devices and the apps installed on them, often without needing the device to be in USB debugging mode, so they can assess a device as it normally operates.
Okay, so reconnaissance first.
Right. Then, for getting past security features like FRP, Factory Reset Protection, which is designed to prevent unauthorized access to lost or stolen devices after a reset, attackers use specialized tools. Things like 4Key or Octopus FRP can exploit software vulnerabilities to bypass FRP.
So even that protection isn't foolproof.
Not always, no. Then you have things like Kali NetHunter. This is a powerful suite that essentially turns an Android device itself into a penetration testing and attack platform. It allows for various network attacks, HID keyboard attacks, and even generating custom Metasploit payloads to compromise target networks, all from the phone.
Using the phone as the weapon.
Exactly. Attackers can even launch DOS attacks using LOIC, Low Orbit Ion Cannon. There are mobile versions of this tool that allow launching denial-of-service attacks directly from an Android phone against a target IP address. For staying hidden, tools like Orbot Proxy leverage the Tor network to encrypt and hide internet traffic, making the attacker's activities harder to trace. And a really significant risk arises if a device has its Android Debug Bridge, ADB, enabled and accessible over the network, maybe over TCP port 5555. Tools like PhoneSploit Pro can connect to this open ADB port remotely. Once connected, the attacker can do almost anything. Capture the screen, dump system info, view running apps, forward ports, install or uninstall apps, toggle Wi-Fi. It's essentially full remote control if ADB is left exposed.
That sounds like a major misconfiguration risk.
It absolutely is. Then there's a more subtle attack called the man-in-the-disk attack, MITD. This exploits apps that don't properly secure how they use external storage, like an SD card. An attacker, maybe through another malicious app already on the device, monitors this external storage. When a legitimate app tries to download an update or data file to external storage, the attacker intercepts it and replaces or manipulates it with malicious code before the legitimate app reads it back.
So they poison the data on the disk before the app uses it, like a malicious mail carrier swapping out a software update package.
That's a great analogy, yeah. It can lead to installing fraudulent apps, bypassing security, stealing credentials, accessing personal info, even controlling hardware like the mic or camera if the malicious code gets executed.
Wow.
And of course, we have to mention the Metasploit framework. It's a standard tool for both ethical hackers and attackers. They can use it to build custom malicious Android applications, APKs. If a user is tricked into installing and running one of these malicious APKs, it can open a powerful remote interpreter session back to the attacker. This gives them deep access to the device to gather sensitive data like system info, network configuration, stored files, and even dump SMS messages or call logs. #tag securing Android devices, your defensive playbook.
That's quite an arsenal of attack methods targeting Android. So turning it around, what can we as users and, well, ethical hackers trying to defend systems actually do? What's our defensive playbook for Android?
Okay, the defensive playbook for Android really boils down to a few core principles. Layering defenses. First, fortify your device basics. This means always enable strong screen locks, use strong passwords, PINs, patterns, or biometrics. Regularly update your operating system and security patches. Keep reputable Android antivirus software active and updated. And crucially, unless you have a very specific expert reason, never root your device.
Okay, basics first.
Right. Second, be hyper-vigilant about the apps you install. Only download apps from official Android markets, primarily the Google Play Store. Even then, scrutinize app permissions carefully before you hit install. Grant only the permissions that make sense for the app's function. And definitely avoid downloading and installing raw APK files directly from untrusted websites or third-party sources.
Got it. Vet your apps.
Absolutely. Third, secure your data and network activity. Enable encryption for your device storage. Most modern Android phones do this by default, but check. Use a trusted VPN service to encrypt all your internet traffic, especially when you're on public Wi-Fi networks. Enable two-step verification, or 2FA, on all your important online accounts, Google, banking, social media, and disable Wi-Fi and Bluetooth when you're not actively using them to reduce your attack surface.
Good network hygiene.
And finally, be smart about managing your personal data. Customize your locked home screen to show minimal personal information. Don't overshare personal details when signing up for services online. Enable GPS for tracking lost or stolen devices using services like Google Find My Device, but be mindful of apps that might be tracking your location unnecessarily. Review those location permissions regularly.
That's a lot of really actionable advice. What about specific security and tracking tools for Android? Any recommendations?
Yeah, there are many good options. For security, robust antivirus solutions like Kaspersky Antivirus, Avira, Avast, McAfee Mobile Security, and Lookout offer comprehensive protection, anti-malware scanning, anti-theft features, web protection, sometimes even anti-phishing for SMS. For tracking a lost or stolen device, as mentioned, Google Find My Device is built-in and invaluable. It allows you to locate your device on a map, make it ring, lock it remotely with a message, or, as a last resort, remotely wipe all data. There are other third-party options like Prey as well. #hacking iOS, the Apple walled garden under siege.
All right, we've thoroughly dissected Android. Now let's turn our attention across the aisle to Apple's mobile operating system. iOS, Apple's devices, iPhones and iPads, are often perceived as being inherently more secure because of their walled garden approach. But even walled gardens can be under siege, right?
That's an excellent way to put it. iOS is Apple's proprietary mobile OS, and its restrictive nature, only running officially on Apple hardware, is a core part of its security philosophy. It aims for a tightly controlled ecosystem. It limits what kinds of apps can run, how they can interact with each other and the system, all the way from the kernel and drivers up to the application layer, the Cocoa Touch framework. It's designed to be locked down, but despite those tight controls, vulnerabilities still exist. Attackers are constantly probing for weaknesses in the design or implementation. And the ultimate chink in that walled garden, the way to break out of Apple's restrictions, is something called jailbreaking. #jailbreaking iOS, breaking the chains.
Okay, let's talk about jailbreaking iOS. It sounds very much like the Apple equivalent of Android rooting. What exactly is it, and what are the risks involved?
It is indeed very analogous to rooting on Android. Jailbreaking is the process of modifying the iOS kernel, installing special patches that allow users to run third-party applications that haven't been signed or authorized by Apple through the App Store. It essentially provides root or administrative access to the operating system and removes many of Apple's sandbox restrictions that normally keep apps isolated from each other and the core system.
And why did people do it? Same reasons as rooting.
Pretty much. Users might jailbreak for greater customization of the look and feel, to install tweaks, access the underlying file system, or run apps that Apple doesn't allow in the App Store.
But the security risks must be similar too.
Absolutely. The risks are substantial. Like rooting, it voids your device's warranty. It can definitely lead to poor performance or battery life issues. Most importantly, it makes the device highly susceptible to malware infection, as many of the built-in security protections are disabled. And yes, like rooting, a failed jailbreak attempt carries the risk of bricking the device. It fundamentally compromises the security model Apple intended.
I understand there are different types of jailbreaks too, based on the exploit used and how persistent they are after a reboot.
That's right. Jailbreaks exploit different kinds of vulnerabilities. You might have a userland exploit, which finds a loophole in a system application. These are often easier for Apple to patch with a software update. More powerful are iBoot exploits, targeting the bootloader, or the holy grail for attackers, a bootrom exploit. This finds a flaw in the secure ROM, the very first code that runs when the device powers on. Bootrom exploits are often unpatchable by software updates. Apple might need to release new hardware to fix them.
Wow, unpatchable.
Yeah. And then there's the tethering aspect. An untethered jailbreak means the device stays jailbroken even after you reboot it. Semi-untethered means it boots normally, but you need to rerun the jailbreak tool to activate the jailbreak features. And a tethered jailbreak requires the device to be connected to a computer every time it reboots to even start up properly. #hacking iOS devices, specific exploits and tools.
All right, so with that concept of jailbreaking, understood the ultimate way to break open iOS. What are some specific exploits and tools attackers use for hacking iOS devices? Maybe even methods that don't require a jailbreak.
Attackers have definitely evolved sophisticated methods, some targeting non-jailbroken devices too. For instance, commercial spyware tools like SpyZ are marketed as online platforms that allow remote monitoring of things like SMS, call logs, app chats like WhatsApp, and GPS location. Some claim to do this without requiring the target iOS device to be jailbroken, often relying on iCloud backup exploits or similar methods. They operate stealthily, making them hard for the average user to detect.
So spyware is a real threat even on standard iOS.
It can be, yes. A clever technical exploit is the iOS trustjacking attack. This leverages that familiar "trust this computer" dialog box that pops up when you connect an iOS device to a new computer via USB. If a victim is tricked into tapping trust on an attacker's compromised computer and the victim has iTunes Wi-Fi sync enabled, that attacker's computer can potentially gain persistent remote access to the device over Wi-Fi later on.
What could they do with that access?
They could potentially monitor data, see the screen in some cases, force backups containing sensitive data, like SMS, even deleted photos sometimes, app data, and potentially even replace legitimate apps with malicious versions during a sync.
That trust button suddenly seems much more significant.
It is. Treat it carefully. For post-exploitation on already compromised iOS devices, maybe ones that are jailbroken or vulnerable in other ways, frameworks like Seashell exist. These can exploit specific vulnerabilities like issues in code signing verification, core trust, to bypass security checks and gain interactive command sessions on the device, allowing access to sensitive data like browsing history, Safari history, and more.
Okay, and what about manipulating apps directly?
Yeah, for runtime manipulation, tools like Cycrypt are powerful. It's basically a hybrid interpreter that understands Objective-C and JavaScript, allowing attackers or security researchers to hook into running applications. They can inspect and modify the app's behavior while it's running, potentially bypassing login screens, modifying functionality, or defeating jailbreak detection mechanisms built into apps. This is often done using a technique called iOS method swizzling or monkey patching, which dynamically changes how an app's code behaves at runtime.
Sounds very advanced.
It requires skill, yes. And to extract stored secrets, attackers target the iOS keychain. This is where iOS securely stores sensitive items like passwords, certificates, and encryption keys. Tools like Keychain Dumper are designed to try and extract these secrets from the keychain, often leveraging specific entitlements or vulnerabilities on jailbroken devices.
So the keychain isn't impenetrable either.
Not if the device's security is compromised at a lower level, no. And for comprehensive app analysis and manipulation, a tool called Objection is very popular. It's built on the Frida instrumentation toolkit and provides a user-friendly way to perform many of these tasks. Method hooking, SSL pinning bypass, jailbreak detection bypass, dumping the iOS keychain, monitoring the clipboard, and more. It's a versatile tool for mobile security assessments. Hashtag iOS malware threats to the Apple ecosystem.
It's clear that even with Apple's stringent controls in the walled garden, iOS is definitely not immune to malware or sophisticated attacks. What are some notable examples of real-world threats targeting this ecosystem?
Despite the strong perception of invulnerability, iOS faces persistent and sometimes very targeted malware threats. A significant recent example is the Gold Pickaxe Trojan. This one is particularly insidious because it relies heavily on social engineering. It tricks victims into scanning their faces and identification documents, often by impersonating legitimate government services or apps. For iOS devices, the key step is persuading the victim to install a masked mobile device management MDM profile onto their iPhone or iPad.
Right. MDM is normally for enterprise control.
Yeah.
How does installing that profile help the attacker on a personal device?
Exactly. MDM profiles grant extensive remote control capabilities. By tricking the victim into installing a malicious MDM profile, the attackers essentially gain enterprise-level control over the victim's personal device. This allows them to remotely configure the device, silently install other harmful applications, potentially intercept traffic, and gather desired information like phone numbers, login credentials, maybe even bank account details accessed through other apps. It's a clever abuse of a legitimate enterprise feature.
That's incredibly sneaky, using MDM like that.
Very. And of course, there have been other high-profile iOS malware families over the years, like Spectral Blur, various forms of mercenary spyware, like LightSpy or King's Pawn, and the infamous Pegasus spyware, which was used for highly targeted surveillance against specific individuals. So while less common than Android malware, perhaps, the threats against iOS can be very sophisticated and impactful. Hashtag securing iOS devices, the Apple defense strategy.
All right, we've definitely covered a lot of ground on iOS vulnerabilities and threats. Now let's switch gears firmly to the defense. What are the key security guidelines for protecting iOS devices? What's the Apple defense strategy?
For iOS, the defense strategy really revolves around leveraging Apple's built-in security features effectively and adopting smart, cautious user habits. Think layers again. First, fortify your access controls. Always enable passcode lock, preferably using Face ID or Touch ID for convenience and security. Use a strong alphanumeric passcode, not just a simple 4 or 6-digit peon. Set a short auto-lock timeout so the device locks quickly when idle. And consider enabling the erase data option after 10 failed passcode attempts. It's a drastic measure, but highly effective against brute force attempts if your device is stolen.
Okay, lock it down tight.
Exactly. Second, practice good app and data hygiene. This is crucial. Only download applications from the official Apple App Store. Be extremely wary of installing apps via enterprise provisioning profiles or third-party stores unless you absolutely trust the source. Never open unknown links or attachments in emails or messages. And try not to store highly sensitive data directly in insecure app databases. If avoidable, use the keychain where possible.
Stick to the App Store and be cautious.
Right. Third, maintain network vigilance. Use your iOS device only on secured, trusted Wi-Fi networks whenever possible. Avoid connecting to open public Wi-Fi without using a reputable VPN. Disable Wi-Fi and Bluetooth when you're not actively using them. And enable the Ask to Join Network setting to prevent your device from automatically connecting to potentially malicious open networks it detects.
Smart network habits.
Fourth, keep everything updated. Regularly update the iOS operating system itself. Apple frequently releases security patches in these updates. Also, keep your installed apps updated from the App Store as developers patch vulnerabilities in their apps too.
Updates are key.
Fifth, protect your privacy and accounts. Configure and use the Find My iPhone or Find My service. This allows you to remotely locate, lock, or wipe your device if it's lost or stolen. Use strong, unique passwords for your Apple ID and enable two-factor authentication, 2FA. This is critically important for protecting your account and iCloud data. Periodically delete the keyboard cache and settings, as it can sometimes retain typed information. And review app permissions regularly, especially location services. Disable geotagging for the camera if you don't need it.
Control your data.
And finally, avoid risky behaviors. The big one, do not jailbreak your device, especially if you use it for work or access sensitive data. Jailbreaking fundamentally undermines iOS security. Also, be aware of juicejacking, the potential for malicious actors to compromise public USB charging stations to steal data or install malware. Carry your own charger and wall plug, or use a power-only USB cable data blocker if you must use a public port.
So resist the urge to jailbreak and be careful where you charge. That's a strong defense strategy overall. What about specific security and tracking tools available for iOS devices?
Yeah, while iOS has strong built-in security, additional tools can provide extra layers. For mobile security tools, you have reputable options like Malwarebytes Mobile Security, Norton Mobile Security, McAfee Mobile Security, Avast, AVG, and Kaspersky Standard. These often offer features beyond basic malware scanning, like filtering suspicious SMS messages, blocking malicious websites, web protection, blocking scam calls, and sometimes include VPN services. For tracking, as mentioned, Apple's integrated Find My service is the primary and most powerful tool. It's built into the OS and iCloud. It lets you locate your device on a map, remotely lock it, play a sound to help find it nearby, display a custom message on the lock screen, or, as a last resort, remotely erase all data to protect your privacy. It's essential to have this set up, #mobile device management, MDM, and enterprise security.
Okay, we've gone deep into both Android and iOS individually. Now let's maybe zoom out a bit and look at the enterprise level. How do organizations manage and secure potentially hundreds or thousands of mobile devices, especially now with the huge proliferation of personal devices being used for work? This brings us squarely to mobile device management, or MDM.
Exactly. Mobile device management, MDM, is the term for platforms and technologies designed for the over-the-air or sometimes wired distribution of applications, data, policies, and configuration settings to mobile devices like smartphones and tablets. Its primary purpose in an enterprise context is to implement consistent organization-wide policies. This helps reduce IT support costs, minimize business disruption if a device is lost or compromised, and significantly mitigate security risks associated with mobile devices accessing corporate resources.
So it's like a central command center for mobile devices in the company.
That's a great way to think about it. System administrators use MDM solutions to deploy and manage software, secure devices, monitor their compliance status, and provide support for both company-owned devices and, increasingly, personal devices brought in under a BYOD policy. Basic MDM features typically include things like enforcing device passcode requirements, enabling remote lock and wipe capabilities, detecting if a device has been rooted or jailbroken, and potentially blocking access if it has, enforcing other security policies like encryption, and providing real-time monitoring and reporting on the device fleet. Hashtag bring your own device, BYOD benefits and risks.
We've mentioned BYOD quite a few times now, bring your own device. It seems so prevalent today. Let's do a quick deep dive specifically into that concept. What exactly is BYD, and what are its core benefits and, perhaps more importantly, its challenges or risks?
Sure. BYOD, bring your own device, is exactly what it sounds like. A policy or practice where employees are allowed, or even encouraged, to use their personally owned devices, laptops, smartphones, tablets, to connect to organizational networks and access corporate resources, data, and applications.
And the benefits seem obvious, right? Employee convenience.
The benefits are definitely clear, which is why it's so popular. You generally see increased employee productivity and satisfaction because people are using devices they're already familiar and comfortable with. There's no learning curve for a new company device. It also usually leads to greater work flexibility, enabling employees to work more easily from anywhere, anytime, using the device they always have with them.
Makes sense, but the risks must be significant.
Oh, absolutely. The challenges and risks are equally, if not more significant, and organizations need to manage them carefully. The biggest is probably data leakage and endpoint security issues. Sensitive, confidential corporate information now resides on personal devices that might not meet corporate security standards or could be easily lost or shared inappropriately. Improper device disposal is another risk. If an employee sells or gets rid of their personal phone without properly wiping corporate data first, that data could be exposed. There's a support burden for IT. Supporting a huge variety of personal devices, operating systems, and configurations increases IT costs and complexity compared to managing a standardized fleet of company devices. Security consistency is harder too. A major headache is mixing personal and corporate data on the same device. This creates serious privacy implications for the employee and makes it technically difficult for the company to selectively wipe only corporate data if the employee leaves or the device is compromised without potentially wiping personal photos or files.
And that's a tricky balance.
Very. Lost or stolen devices are a huge risk, obviously. A lost personal phone can mean a direct compromise of corporate data. Lack of awareness is common too. Employees often aren't adequately educated about the security risks and their responsibilities under a BYOD policy. There's the risk of users bypassing organizations' network policies if they connect via cellular data instead of the corporate Wi-Fi, potentially missing security controls applied at the network level. Jailbreaking or rooting on personal devices is a nightmare for corporate security, as it bypasses many MDM controls and security measures. And finally, things like inadequate backup of corporate data stored locally, outdated software and patch management on personal devices, and the rise of shadow IT, using unauthorized cloud services on personal devices, all add to the risk profile. Hashtag BYOD policy implementation, a strategic approach.
Okay, given that pretty daunting list of risks, it seems clear that just allowing BYOD isn't nearly enough. There needs to be a really strategic approach to implementing a solid BYOD policy.
Absolutely. The potential benefits of BYOD are really only realized if those significant risks are proactively and properly managed. Simply saying, okay, use your own phone, is asking for trouble. A strategic approach is essential. This requires several key steps. First, organizations should conduct a Privacy Impact Assessment, PIA, right at the start of any BYOD project, involving teams from HR, legal, security, and privacy to understand the implications. Second, they need to carefully select which devices or platforms will be supported and build a technology portfolio to manage user access. This might involve MDM solutions, perhaps virtual desktop infrastructure, VDI, to keep data off the device, or specific secure container apps installed on the device.
So define the playing field.
Exactly. Third, and absolutely critical, is developing clear, comprehensive policies. This needs close collaboration between IT, HR, legal, security, and privacy departments. The policies must cover everything: information security requirements, data ownership, who owns what on the device, confidentiality rules, tracking and monitoring permissions, what happens upon employee termination, data wipe, Wi-Fi security expectations, acceptable use, and consequences for non-compliance.
Get it all in writing.
Fourth, implement robust security measures. This includes thorough security assessments of the BYOD strategy, strong asset and identity management, controls over local storage and removable media, network access controls like NAC, application controls, whitelisting, blacklisting, web and messaging security, device health checks, so is it jailbroken, and potentially data loss prevention, DLP solutions. And finally, establish clear support processes. BYOD inevitably leads to an increase in IT help desk calls, so organizations need to be prepared to handle support for a wider range of issues on personal devices.
That sounds like a very thorough process. So, we've got the strategic framework for a BYOD policy. Let's get down to the practical guidelines now. What should administrators running the program and the employees participating in it specifically do to keep things secure in a BYOD environment?
Right. It really requires a dual approach, a shared responsibility model. There are key guidelines for both the IT administrators and the end-user employees. For the administrator, some key guidelines include ensuring data centers handling corporate data are secured with multi-layered protection, actively educating employees about the BYOD policy, security risks, and their responsibilities regarding ownership of apps and data, always using encrypted channels for corporate data transfer from the device, controlling access based on the principle of least privilege or need to know, strictly prohibiting jailbroken or rooted devices from accessing corporate resources enforced via MDM, applying session authentication timeouts, enforcing connection through the company LAN where possible, requiring complex passcodes and regular changes, potentially requiring multi-factor authentication, MFA, for remote access, implementing a clear offboarding strategy that includes total or selective data wipe, implementing strong encryption for corporate data both in transit, SSL/TLS VPN, and at rest on the device, enforced via MDM, ensuring devices have regular software updates, avoiding configurations that allow offline access to highly sensitive info if possible, enabling periodic reauthentication, real-time monitoring through an enterprise mobility management, EMM, or MDM solution, developing app blacklists, ensuring corporate data is backed up appropriately, not just relying on the user, conducting regular security audits and vulnerability assessments of the BYOD environment, implementing containerization or sandboxing technologies to separate corporate data from personal data on the device, enabling remote white block capabilities, utilizing application whitelisting, blacklisting, enforcing device-level encryption like BitLocker or File Vault if laptops are included, and crafting that careful offboarding strategy.
Wow, that's a heavy lift for the admin team. What about the employee's responsibilities?
The employee's role is equally critical for BYOD success. Key guidelines for them include using encryption for any sensitive data stored locally, if allowed, maintaining a clear separation between business and personal data and activities on the device, registering their device with the company's MDMEM for remote locate wipe capabilities if required by policy, regularly updating their device's OS and applications, using company-approved antivirus and potentially DLP solutions if provided, setting strong passcodes for the device lock screen, and potentially for specific sensitive apps, avoiding downloads from untrusted sources, being extremely cautious with links and attachments in emails and messages, ensuring all corporate data and credentials are securely erased from the device before leaving the organization or disposing of the device, using only authorized repair dealers if the device needs fixing, not uploading sensitive company data to personal cloud storage accounts like personal Dropbox or Google Drive, reporting loss or theft of the device to IT immediately, always using a secure VPN provided by the company when accessing corporate resources over public Wi-Fi, avoiding synchronization of corporate data with other personal devices like a personal TV, desktop, or via Bluetooth, absolutely refraining from jailbreaking or rooting their device, carefully reviewing app permissions and granting only those necessary for the app's function, enforcing automatic device locking and using biometric authentication where available, and potentially installing company-approved device tracking software, #mobile security guidelines and tools building a robust defense.
That's an exhaustive list of guidelines for both administrators and employees, really highlighting that shared responsibility you mentioned for BYD security. Okay, to try and tie everything together now from our whole discussion, let's maybe revisit some of those key OWASP mobile risks we started with. But this time, let's focus specifically on the concrete solutions or mitigations for each, alongside some general security guidelines and tools that apply across the board.
Excellent idea. Understanding the threats is one thing, but knowing how to actively counter them is the crucial next step. Let's briefly touch upon practical solutions for some of those critical OS risks we highlighted earlier. For M1 improper credential usage, the solution is clear. Avoid hard-coding credentials anywhere. Always encrypt credentials during transmission using strong protocols like TLS. Use secure, revocable access tokens, like OWASP 2.0, instead of embedding passwords. Implement strong authentication protocols and regularly rotate any API keys or tokens used by the app.
Okay, protect the keys.
Right. To address M2 and adequate supply chain security, developers need to practice secure coding internally, conduct thorough code reviews and security testing, securely sign their applications before distribution, use only trusted, well-maintained third-party libraries and components and keep them updated, establish security protocols for software updates, and actively monitor the supply chain for reported incidents or vulnerabilities in components they use.
Vet your ingredients.
Exactly. For M3 insecure authentication authorizations, solutions include avoiding weak patterns or easily guessable credentials, reinforcing authentication on the server side, never trust the client alone, utilizing device biometrics like Face ID or Touch ID where appropriate, carefully validating user roles and permissions on the server for every sensitive action, and potentially implementing local integrity checks on the device.
Strong gates and guards.
To counter M5 insecure communication, the fundamental rule is assume the network is always vulnerable. Apply SSL/TLS consistently for all network communication carrying sensitive data. Use strong, modern cipher suites. Use trusted certificate authorities, CA providers, and consider implementing certificate pinning to prevent MITM attacks using rogue certificates. Perform proper SSL chain verification. Alert users clearly if an invalid certificate is encountered. Critically, never send sensitive data over alternate channels like SMS or MMS. Consider an additional encryption layer on top of TLS for highly sensitive data, and avoid coding apps to blindly accept untrusted certificates.
Encrypt everything in transit, basically.
Pretty much. And for M9 insecure data storage, solutions involve implementing robust encryption for any sensitive data stored locally on the device. Use secure communication protocols, HTTP, SSL/TLS, when transmitting data. Store data only in secure, restricted access storage locations provided by the OS, like Keychain on iOS or Keystore on Android. Implement robust access controls around the data. Perform proper input validation and sanitization to prevent injection attacks that might expose stored data. Use secure session management techniques and keep the OS and libraries regularly updated and patched. #tag general guidelines for mobile platform security.
That's a very clear set of solutions mapped back to the OWASP risks. Beyond those specific app development points, what are some overarching general guidelines for mobile platform security that apply to users and organizations across the board?
Right. Some general best practices to build a robust defense posture include: first, practice app minimalism and hygiene. Don't overload your device with unnecessary apps. Avoid apps that request excessive permissions. Be wary of apps that automatically upload photos or data to the cloud without explicit consent. Second, perform security assessments. Organizations should assess the security of their mobile app architecture. Users should be aware of the security implications of the apps they install. Third, maintain configuration control. Use MDMM to enforce security policies in enterprise environments. Users should regularly review their device settings. Fourth, trusted sources only. Install apps only from official trusted app stores, Google Play, Apple App Store. Fifth, secure disposal. Securely wipe all data from a device before selling, donating, or disposing of it. Factory reset might not be enough. Look for secure wipe options. Sixth, limit location sharing. Don't share your GPS location information unnecessarily through apps or social media. Seventh, manage connectivity. Disable unused radios like Wi-Fi and Bluetooth when not needed. Avoid connecting a device to two separate networks simultaneously, i.e. Wi-Fi and a VPN over cellular, if it might bypass security policies. Eighth, strong authentication. Use strong passcodes, ideally 8+ character complex ones, enable idle timeouts, and configure lockout wipe policies after multiple failed attempts. Ninth, keep updated. Update the OS and all applications regularly to patch known vulnerabilities. 10th, enable remote management. Use built-in features, Find My or MDM, for remote locate, lock, and wipe capabilities. 11th, no rooting jailbreaking. Enforce policies against it in enterprise and strongly discourage it for personal use due to the security risks. 12th, encrypt everything. Encrypt device storage and any backups, local or cloud. 13th, backup wisely. Perform periodic backups and synchronization, ensuring the backup process itself is secure. Use encrypted backup secure over the AirSync. 14th, email security. Filter email forwarding barriers if possible. Prevent local caching of sensitive emails if policy dictates. 15th, app certification. Configure policies via MDM to allow only properly signed applications and ensure apps run within their sandbox. 16th, browser hardening. Harden browser permission rules where possible. 17th, clear policies. Design and implement clear, well-communicated mobile device security policies. 18th, MFA and secure protocols. Enforce multi-factor authentication. Encourage users to log off apps when finished, and always use secure protocols for communication. #tag specific countermeasures for SMS phishing and OTP hijacking.
Those general guidelines are absolutely critical building blocks. Let's briefly focus back on two particularly deceptive and, frankly, effective attacks we discussed earlier: SMS phishing, smishing, and OTP hijacking. What are the specific countermeasures users and organizations should employ against these?
Right, those need specific attention. For SMS phishing countermeasures, for users, first and foremost, never reply to a suspicious SMS without independently verifying the source, e.g., calling your bank using the number from their official website, not the one in the text. Absolutely do not click links in unexpected or suspicious texts. Never reply to requests for personal or financial information via SMS. Be aware of your bank's official SMS communication policy. Consider blocking internet-originated texts if your carrier allows it. Resist any sense of urgency. Legitimate organizations rarely demand immediate action via SMS for security issues. Never call phone numbers provided in a suspicious SMS. Be wary of unexpected prize notifications or offers that seem too good to be true. Check messages for spelling and grammatical errors, often a red flag. Reject any unknown subscription request. Avoid saving confidential data like passwords or credit card numbers directly on your phone in plain text. Report any suspected fraud to your bank, carrier, and relevant authorities. Install reputable anti-phishing SMS filtering apps, keep your OS and security software updated, and use MFA wherever possible. For organizations, use official, registered short codes for SMS communication. Have a clear incident response plan for phishing attacks. Conduct phishing simulation exercises to train users. Use only authorized messaging platforms and continuously educate users about the latest phishing tactics.
Okay, a lot of user vigilance required there. What about OTP hijacking?
OTP hijacking countermeasures also require effort from both sides. For users, use strong, unique passwords for all accounts and update them regularly. Use a password manager. Keep your device's software and OS fully updated. Be extremely vigilant about clicking links or downloading attachments. Only access sensitive sites that use SSLTLS, look for HTTPS. Enable SIM locking with a strong PIN. Disable sensitive notifications, OTP previews, from appearing on your lock screen. If possible, avoid using apps that only offer SMS for authentication recovery. Prioritize app-based authenticators or hardware keys. Minimize using SMS or email as account recovery methods if alternatives exist. Never forward OTP codes received via SMS or email. Always manually type OTPs. Don't rely on autofill if you suspect anything unusual. For developers organizations, transmit OTPs over secure, encrypted channels. Push notifications via a secure channel are generally better than SMS. Implement end-to-end encryption where possible. Combine OTPs with other factors like biometrics or hardware tokens for higher security. Limit the number of OTP requests allowed in a short period. Set short expiration times for OTPs, for example, 2 to 5 minutes. Use behavioral analytics to detect suspicious login attempts. Continuously raise user awareness about phishing and social engineering tactics targeting OTPs. Consider supporting hardware OTPs like YubiKeys or security keys, F502 WebAuthn. Use secure push protocols. Use standardized secure OTP generation algorithms like HOTP or TOTP. Ensure generated OTPs are unique and cryptographically strong. #tag critical data storage in Android, Key Store, and iOS. Keychain recommendations.
That's very detailed on OTPs. Beyond transient data like OTPs, where should apps store more persistent critical data like API keys or user credentials? On Android and iOS. We mentioned Key Store and Keychain earlier. What are the recommendations for using those securely?
Right. Both platforms provide specific hardware-backed or secure mechanisms for storing sensitive cryptographic keys and small pieces of data. Secure usage is key. For Android, using the Android Key Store system, use strong authentication methods like user presence or biometrics to authorize the use of keys stored in the Key Store, especially for server authentication keys. Store different types of keys, master keys, encryption keys, in different locations or with different protection levels if possible. Consider deriving keys from user-provided passphrases using secure key derivation functions. Store master keys within the software key store if hardware-backed isn't feasible, but protect them appropriately. Store encryption keys in private, app-specific locations. Ensure that data stored in shared preferences, a common place for app settings, is encrypted if it's sensitive, potentially using keys managed by the key store. For iOS, using the keychain services, always follow the principle of least privilege when setting keychain item accessibility. Never hardcode sensitive data directly in the app's source code. Store it in the keychain. Obfuscate your application code to make reverse engineering harder. Always transmit sensitive data over encrypted network connections, TLS. Set appropriate permissions for any content providers used by the app. Leverage Touch ID, Face ID, or the device passcode to safeguard keychain items requiring user authentication for access. Utilize the hardware-backed secure enclave for key generation and storage where possible, providing 256-bit AES encryption. Use access control lists, ACLs, to finely tune when and how keychain items can be accessed, for example, only when device is unlocked. Store small chunks of data directly in the keychain where appropriate. Specify appropriate access control flags when creating keychain items. Ensure keychain data is erased when the application is uninstalled if necessary. Encrypt any sensitive data shared between an app and its extensions, example using app groups securely. Practice secure coding principles throughout the app. Secure any inter-process communication, IPC mechanisms used. If storing data in the cloud, ensure it's encrypted before uploading. Tag reverse engineering mobile applications, unnecessary evil.
We've touched on reverse engineering a few times, mostly from the attacker's perspective. But from a security professional standpoint, trying to defend systems, is it sometimes a necessary evil? What are the legitimate uses for reverse engineering mobile apps?
It is absolutely necessary for security professionals, yes. Not really an evil, but a critical tool. Reverse engineering is the process of analyzing an application's compiled code, the binary, to understand its structure, functionality, and algorithms, and potentially extracting or regenerating parts of the original source code, possibly with modifications. For security professionals and ethical hackers, its uses are vital. Vulnerability discovery. It's often the primary way to find flaws like insecure data storage practices, hard-coded secrets, improper implementation of cryptographic functions, or weak authentication logic within the compiled app code itself. Malware analysis. Dissecting malicious applications, malware, to understand exactly how they work, what data they steal, how they communicate with command and control servers, and how to develop detection signatures or mitigation strategies. Understanding communication protocols. Figuring out how an app communicates with its backend servers, especially if the protocols are proprietary or poorly documented, which is crucial for API security testing. Enhancing black box testing. When testing an app without source code access, black box, reverse engineering can help understand internal workings to bypass client-side controls or anti-dynamic analysis techniques, allowing for deeper testing. Improving static analysis. Understanding disassembled code helps refine automated static analysis tools and interpret their findings more accurately. Resilience assessment. Assessing how well an application resists tampering or reverse engineering attempts. Compliance and auditing. Verifying if an application complies with specific security standards or regulations, or investigating potential patent infringement issues.
So, a powerful tool for defenders too. What tools are used for this?
There are many tools. For static and dynamic analysis, you have frameworks like MobSF, Mobile Security Framework. For disassembling and recompiling, AppTool is standard for Android. Decompilers like JEB are very powerful. Dynamic instrumentation frameworks like Frida are essential for runtime analysis and manipulation. Others include AndroGuard, Bytecode Viewer, and specialized tools like SciHunt for source code analysis focusing on OWASP mobile top 10 checks. ## app repackaging detectors.
Okay, one attack method we briefly mentioned was app repackaging. That's taking a legitimate app, injecting malicious code, and redistributing it, right?
Right.
How do organizations or app stores detect that?
Yes, repackaging is a significant threat, especially in the Android ecosystem where installing apps from third-party sources is easier. Attackers download a popular legitimate app, inject their malicious code, e.g. spyware, banking Trojan, and then re-upload it to third-party stores or distribute it via phishing, hoping users install the poison version thinking it's authentic. To counter this, app repackaging detectors and runtime application self-protection, RASP solutions, are used. A prominent example is AppDome. It's a platform that provides RASP capabilities for both Android and iOS apps. AppDome and similar RASP tools like those from Woltra, ISGuard, or free RASP libraries aims to automatically add layers of security into an existing application binary without requiring changes to the source code. This can include defenses against tampering, reverse engineering, obfuscation, anti-debugging, method hooking, and specifically detection of unauthorized repackaging. They often work by verifying the app's digital signature and integrity at runtime, checking for unexpected changes using checksum validation, and potentially reporting tampering attempts back to a security operations center. Other tools like AndroCompare or FSquadyRA2 focus specifically on comparing APKs to detect similarities and potential repackaging. ## mobile protection and anti-spyware tools.
All right, nearing the end here, let's quickly recap some of the overarching mobile protection and anti-spyware tools that users and organizations can leverage as part of their defense strategy.
Sure. For general mobile protection, as we discussed, there's a wide array of security suites available from well-known vendors. These include Avast Antivirus and Security, TotalAve, Malwarebytes Mobile Security, Komodo Mobile Security, AVG Antivirus, Norton Mobile Security, Trend Micro Mobile Security, Kaspersky Standard, and specialized tools like Certo for iOS or I Am Notified, which focus on detecting specific threats or configuration changes. These typically offer a bundle of features like antivirus scanning, web protection, anti-theft, privacy advisors, and sometimes VPNs, or call SMS filtering. Specifically for anti-spyware, which focuses on detecting stealthy monitoring apps, tools like TotalAve and Notified and halt various forms of spyware, malware, and adware. Certo is known for iOS spyware detection. Other tools like Anti-Spy Detector, I Am Notified, and Anti-Spy for Android specialize in finding hidden tracking apps or detecting unusual device behavior that might indicate spying. Security is another option in this space. The effectiveness can vary, but they provide an additional layer of scrutiny against these invasive threats.
And for the ethical hackers or security teams conducting assessments, what about mobile pen testing toolkits?
For professional penetration testing, there are comprehensive toolkits and platforms. AminiWeb Mobile Suite is one example, leveraging machine learning alongside manual testing for mobile pen testing, DevSecOps integration, software composition analysis, SCA, and providing tailored remediation guidance, often with a zero false positive service level agreement, SLA. Other platforms include Codified Security, Astra Security, AppNox, and Data Therum's Mobile Secure. And as mentioned before, the open source MobSF Mobile Security Framework is a very powerful toolkit for both static and dynamic analysis that's widely used by security professionals. #tag outro.
Wow. We've covered an immense amount of ground today, truly taking a deep dive into the complex world of hacking mobile platforms. From those subtle, socially engineered phishing attempts that trick us on our small screens, all the way up to sophisticated OS-level exploits like abusing SS7 vulnerabilities or the sneaky man-in-the-disk attacks, it's crystal clear that our mobile devices face a constant, evolving barrage of threats. We've explored the unique challenges and attack surfaces presented by both Android's relatively open ecosystem and Apple's more tightly controlled walled garden. And we've dissected many of the powerful tools and clever techniques used by both malicious attackers and the ethical hackers working to defend these platforms.
And crucially, I hope, we've walked through a pretty comprehensive set of countermeasures actions that both individuals and organizations can take. It really underscores that protecting these incredibly powerful devices requires a multi-layered approach. It's not just about having a strong password or installing an antivirus app. It's a combination of constant user awareness, adopting robust security practices and hygiene, and leveraging sophisticated tools and policies like MDM in the enterprise context. The battle for mobile security is definitely dynamic, it's ongoing, and it's constantly evolving as new technologies emerge and attackers adapt their methods.
And that evolving landscape leads me perfectly into a final provocative thought for you, our listener, to consider as we wrap up. As our mobile devices become increasingly intertwined with powerful emerging technologies like artificial intelligence and augmented reality, and as they connect even more intimately to our bodies through wearables, maybe even implants in the future, what entirely new attack vectors might emerge that we haven't even conceived of yet? How will we, as informed users and security professionals, need to adapt our strategies and our thinking to protect the next generation of mobile experiences and the exponentially growing volume of incredibly personal data they will inevitably hold?
It's a future that absolutely demands constant vigilance, continuous learning, and proactive security design.
Indeed it does. Thank you for diving deep with us today on AudioCert. Stay safe and stay informed.